Hey everyone, Brian Zane here with another classic pay-per-view review as nominated by my Patreon backers. This week I'm going to open a real classic, one of the most pivotal pay-per-views in modern wrestling history. I'm talking about WCW Bash at the Beach 1996 from July 7th at the Ocean Center in Daytona Beach, Florida. This show was nominated by Christian Callio and Wesley Landon Woolsey. 1996 WCW, very pivotal time for the company. At this point they're just beginning to dig themselves out of a financial hole. They're finally gaining a foothold against the World Wrestling Federation with the success of their Nitro show, which had been going on for about a year at this point, maybe a year and a half. But the balance of power in the Monday Night War had yet to truly shift. Enter Bash at the Beach 96. This show is, of course, best known for the night that Hulk Hogan ditched the red and yellow attire for his black and white, turning heel for the first time in about 15 years and forming the New World Order, but we'll get to all that soon enough. 8,300 people packed the Ocean Center, so it's a full house, but allegedly only 400 people paid because about a couple weeks before the show began, WCW started being concerned that the show would not have a legit sellout, so they started papering tickets. The show officially sold out with about 2 hours to go, and they actually turned a couple thousand paying people away. The show had 5 dark matches before the official show began, featuring talent like the Steiner Brothers, Harlem Heat, Eddie Guerrero, Rock and Roll Express, Kidman, and Steven Regal. Those guys alone, who aren't on the main show but having all these dark matches, many of which were taped for television, but that collection of guys alone, you can make a whole show based on them alone. Tony Schiavone, Bobby Heenan, and Dusty Rhodes are on commentary. My goal this Halloween is dressed like Bobby Heenan did here on this night, and so let's see if I can hold myself accountable for that come this Halloween. Now, Great American Bash last month, the big storyline, and you'll hear this mentioned about 800 times, was that Eric Bischoff was brutally attacked by Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, the Outsiders, at Great American Bash. They powerbombed him through the stage. He has not been seen or heard from since, and so yeah, Tony and Dusty and Bobby are all wondering where Eric's whereabouts are. Where is he? Is he being held hostage by the Outsiders? Is a common thread we keep hearing in this one. I don't believe he's held hostage, but we'll find out what happens with Bischoff soon enough in the timeline. Your opening matchup sees Psicosis take on Rey Mysterio Jr. in a Cruiserweight exhibition. Mike Tenay joins the announce team to give his knowledge and expertise on Lucha Libre, gives a nice primer to the viewing audience about, the history of Lucha Libre, a very big crash course on the history of Lucha Libre, what masks represent and how luchadors are celebrated in Mexico. If you've never seen a Lucha Libre match before, unfamiliar with that culture, Tenay does a very good job breaking it down in this particular match. One of my favorite parts about this match isn't even the match itself, it's on commentary as Rey is making his entrance. Dusty Rhodes describes him as the future of what this wrestling business will become, and holy shit, Dusty was dead on correct. Of course, Rey is one of the most influential cruiserweights, just wrestlers in general, in America and beyond for the last 20 or some odd years, so Dusty totally called a shot here. Early on, Psicosis tries rolling through the arm wrench, drops himself on his head. Psicosis spikes himself again when doing a suicide dive to the outside. They do recover nicely though with some good lucha things. Psicosis is launched off the apron into the pole it's being used for a later match, and that looks like a pretty scary bump. Not just lucha flips and dips here though, we get a lot of submission attempts too. Rey is at one point launched into the ropes. That's a pretty fun looking bump. Psicosis with a huge senton off the top rope onto the floor. Oh my god, Psicosis, stop trying to kill yourself. Rey mounts an enormous comeback, even hits a Hurricane Rana off the top rope, off the apron, onto the floor by both guys, and I just made all the weird, like, bwah noises I possibly could come out of my mouth when I saw that spot. That looked insane. A twisting acai flip-de-doo by Rey. Psicosis goes for a splash mountain. Rey hits the Frankensteiner at the very last second though. Rey wins, and holy crap, what a match. I have to give this one 3.5 stars out of 4. Not a technically perfect match, but man, so thrilling, so exciting, and fast-paced. There's a couple of breaks there where they get a chance to catch their breath and do some submissions and stuff, but man, when they are on, they are on. This is, between Mike Tenay giving you the rundown of Lucha Libre on commentary and just this match in particular, and Mysterio and Psicosis have a rich history of fighting each other. They probably can do that match in their sleep blindfolded, but it looked fantastic, so fun to watch, a hell of an opener. That is what an opening match should be. Backstage, U.S. Champion Konnan cuts a promo on his opponent Ric Flair, saying he's going to beat the hell out of Flair and his Horseman cronies if need be in order to retain that U.S. Championship. Then it's time for our next match, and I believe we all owe Vince Russo an enormous apology. It is a Carson City silver dollar match, or what I call a sock full of silver dollars on a pole match, as John Tenta takes on Big Bubba. And oh my god, look at the height of that pole. That is more than twice the height of either man in the ring, and they're both big dudes. and the pole is only supported by a few like straps that you have to ratchet shut. How in the hell is that pole going to possibly support either of those men? Half of one of those men, I ask you. Also, I'm really confused what the hell's going on with John Tenta's hair at this point. Now, of course, he's no longer an Avalanche, he's no longer a Shark, he's his own man, going by his own name, having walked away from Dungeon of Doom, but he is rocking what I would best call a half skullet. The back, only one side of the back of his head is actually covered, so maybe 1/4 of his head, if that, it actually has some hair coverage here. At the beginning of the match, the guys are just running into each other, lots of big man moves, lots of big selling by Bubba here. Dusty with his great line, the great delivery here, and I think he's talking about Tenta, where he says, I do not believe that that man with that body can climb that pole to get that sock full of silver dollars. The way he's emphasizing it is so funny. Tenta tries to climb the pole, and again, it's twice their height, wobbly as shit. How's anyone going to climb this thing? Bubba stops him and then does a horrifying looking back suplex off the middle rope. Oh my God. Bubba is crotched on the turnbuckle, and then the announcers say, well gosh, in order to get the sock down, they have to unsecure the post. Who even knew that was an option in a pole match? I always assume people have to climb the pole. Apparently, if you're big enough, you can just like bend the whole thing down if you want to. Bubba finds some tape and wraps Tenta to the ropes and belts him some more. He grabs a pair of scissors to try and cut some more of Tenta's remaining hair. There's a low blow. Tenta cuts himself free and starts cutting the straps, holding the pole up to bring it down. Bubba takes down Tenta again, tells his manager Jimmy Hart to climb the pole for him. Now, and by the way, this pole has one less support than it did before. And even though I know Jimmy Hart is a small man, he's a lightweight, so him climbing that pole is a lot more reasonable than Bubba or Tenta doing it. Still very fearful for Jimmy's life and well-being here as he's climbing that rickety-ass pole. Jimmy makes it all the way to the top of the pole, is able to grab the sock full of silver dollars, but he does not see what's going on behind him. By this point, Tenta has taken down Bubba once again and is now patiently awaiting for the arrival of Jimmy Hart, who is completely oblivious. I do love his early celebration, like, yeah, baby, we got the sock full of silver dollars, ha ha ha. So Jimmy turns around, Tenta grabs the sock out of his hand, dumps Hart off the corner, whomps Bubba in the face of the silver dollars to win the match. I give the match 2 stars out of 4. It is an unattractive car crash of a big hoss fight. Well, and not to mention, it's all on top of this ridiculous stipulation that on paper makes absolutely no sense given the competitors involved, but they find a good way around it with Jimmy Hart. There's still some wild spots in there. Pretty entertaining finish. Good stuff overall, I guess, but still, as far as like a match quality goes, it's pretty average. We go back to the commentary team where they make yet another update about the whereabouts of Eric Bischoff and wondering where he is. Tony Schiavone making this impassioned plea to Bischoff, like, if you're watching this show, Eric, call us and let us know you're okay, while he's wearing a Hawaiian lei around his neck is just a wonderful visual. We then go to a backstage interview with Team WCW for the main event, the Macho Man, Sting, and oh my God, what is wrong with Lex Luger's eyes? They look so damn horrifying here. It's weird, the contrast of the white and black face paint combined with the fact that he has no expression or emotion above his eyebrows makes it look really weird here. And Luger's eyes are particularly beady, especially in comparison to the rest of his face and his body. So yeah, his eyes here in this shot were freaking me the hell out. Taped fist match up next for the coveted Lord of the Ring as Diamond Dallas Page takes on Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Now 2 months before this at Slamboree, a broke and destitute Diamond Dallas Page won the Battle Bowl Battle Royal to win the Lord of the Ring moniker, the fancy ring, and apparently the whole tournament was being billed as a #1 contendership qualifying thing, but Page never got that actual championship match that he qualified for. Anyway, he's fighting Duggan here over the possession of the ring. What is with Duggan being in matches that involve like possession of like props on the line? Because I know he wrestled for like King Haku's crown back in the day as well. I always love when you get a USA chant in a match featuring 2 Americans. Who exactly are you rooting for when you do that? They work a little bit here. DDP on the outside pulls Duggan to the corner and tapes Duggan's legs together around the ring post. Referee Nick Patrick has to undo the tape, which gives DDP a chance to get some heat. The seesaw spot in the ropes by Diamond Dallas Page. My God, what a goofy old school move, but I love it every time. For a match that's all about having taped fists involved and how the danger of punching someone with the taped fists because it hurts the opponent more and it protects the guy giving it, we don't see a whole lot of punches getting thrown around like at all in this matchup. DDP cuts off a suplex attempt by dropping Duggan on his arm, busts out a good God for old time's sake. Page on the top rope, Duggan crotches him, and what a drop down onto the top rope by DDP. Hacksaw with a fiery comeback that sees Page falling out of the ring. Duggan throws him back into the ring, steps in, but DDP kicks the middle rope so it low blows Duggan, and we go into my favorite move on the planet, Diamond cutter. Diamond Dallas Page wins the match here, although after the bell rings, Duggan basically no-sells the Diamond Cutter, gets right back up, some of her off-camera tosses him a new roll of tape, and then we get this ridiculously cartoonish unrolling as Duggan wraps the tape around his fist in record time. DDP is completely oblivious to it, but he turns around and gets one right in the mush by Duggan. So Duggan stands tall at the end, but DDP does officially win the match and retains the Lord of the Ring moniker. We'll see how long that sticks. It's an okay match, but it completely fails to really utilize the stipulation that this whole thing was centered around. The issue of the tape fist wasn't really used until after the match had already ended. I don't think anyone really threw that many punches with a tape fist, or didn't sell them any more than you would when the fist wasn't taped. So kind of a waste of the stipulation. Backstage, Gene Okerlund interviews the Giant, Kevin Sullivan, and Jimmy Hart in the Dungeon of Doom. Gene just calls Jimmy Hart a twerp right to his face.
Gentlemen, please come on in. Jimmy Hart, you little twerp.
Then on stage, Lee Marshall interviews Arn Anderson and Chris Benoit, the Four Horsemen. Arn does put over Sting, Macho Man, and Lex Luger because even though he doesn't like those guys, he is still feeling some WCW solidarity, so he wishes them luck in their match against the Outsiders later on. Then he talks about Sullivan and the Giant. Then we go to Chris Benoit, who has a very hard time articulating how he talks in his promos. He needs some work on his delivery. Then he actually has this really very chilling line at the end of his promo, which is kind of weird to hear.
Sullivan, I'm gonna leave you for dead.
Tag team dog collar match up next as the Nasty Boys take on the Public Enemy. It's Texas Tornado rules. Each man is chained to another person from the opposing team. So in this case, Rocco Rock is chained to Jerry Sags and Johnny Grunge to Brian Knobbs. Instantly they begin brawling on the outside. We get the split screen. Knobbs beats the hell out of Grunge with the trash can. Rock walks the barricade a couple of times. The second time though he pays for it. They fight up on the stage. Knobbs beats Grunge with an inflatable shark, which gets Dusty completely going nuts on commentary.
And now they have the shark. That's a rubber shark!
A man just beat him with a rubber shark!
He's beating a man with a rubber shark!
This match has everything. There's chairs, surfboards, a life preserver, the aforementioned inflatable shark, the chains themselves. There's a lot of stuff going on here. Rock climbs the top of the lifeguard chair on the stage. Sags yanks him off, and as he's coming down, he hits him with another weapon, but he gets hit anyway. They try it again about a minute later, and the whole chair falls over. The whole gang just keeps fighting on, under, around a table. Sags hits Rock with a pile driver on the floor, and they keep fighting. Back in the ring, Sags pulls Rocco off the top rope and lands on a table. It does not break. Rocco just kind of bounces off it. Sag puts him on the table, dives onto him. Table still does not break. Dusty's trying to make up words in this match. At one point, he says he wants to do a blivet off the top, whatever that means. He says they're beating each other until they can belly walk. What is going on? Dusty's brain is breaking here in this matchup. With the table not cooperating, they try to call an audible for a finish. Sags tries to whip Rock off the ropes, but the chain comes undone and Rock gets caught up by the ankle. My God. They finally clothesline poor Rocco with the chain to finally win this stupid match. Heenan says, "What a deal, guys." And Schiavone goes, "This match was a mess." Then after the bell rings, the fight resumes though. Grunge whips Brian Knobbs the chain a couple of times. Sags and Rocco are fighting. At one point, Sags is knocked off the apron, falls on the table. The table finally breaks, which Tony makes a big deal about on commentary. And then we get an elbow drop onto Sags on the broken table. Just wrap this shit up, guys. I give the match 2 stars out of 4. It's kind of like it's being put in the middle here because on the one hand, this is an awesomely bad match. It gets worse with each passing moment and just more ugly and more chaotic, and I'm laughing my ass off watching it. But on the other hand, it's still a very bad match. It's still an ugly encounter by all people involved, and just everything keeps breaking down and working against them. So it's kind of like it's either a 4-star or a 0-star. Let's meet somewhere in the middle because this match it needs to be seen to be believed. Cruiserweight Championship on the lineup next as Dean Malenko, man of 1,000 holds, defends against Disco Inferno, who only made his WCW pay-per-view debut 2 months prior at Slamboree. He found himself in the crosshairs of Malenko a couple weeks before this by interrupting a match that Dean was in on an episode of Nitro. Dean is wrestling very hot right out the gate, and oh my God, the brainbuster that Dean hits on Disco. How do you kick out of that one? Dean is just wrecking Disco's shit, totally one-sided for the first bulk of this whole match. Disco suddenly makes a comeback kind of out of nowhere, hits Dean with a stun gun. Dean cuts him off on the outside though, back on top. Disco with a barrage of elbows. Dean goes for an axe handle, but Disco blocks it and hits the neck breaker, but he cannot capitalize. The story here with Disco is he's trying to find his edge because he's doing the whole dancing fool thing where he'll hit a move and dance and tweak his hair and all that stuff. But this match he's trying to stay focused. There's moments here where he hits a big move and he instinctively goes for a dance move and stops him. It's like, oh, I got to capitalize and pin this guy because he's so serious. So on the it's kind of a twofold story being told where it really gives a lot of legitimacy and credibility and respect to Dean Malenko for how serious of a competitor he is, but also you see Disco trying to toughen up a little bit and try and be more assertive in the ring. Ultimately, Dean hits the double underhook suplex with a beautiful transition into the Texas Cloverleaf. Disco taps. Dean retains the Cruiserweight Championship. What a match this was. I give it 3 stars out of 4. Kind of a hidden gem on this show. I really had no expectations going into it. I will admit, some of the transitions that Disco made from taking heat to go into his comeback were kind of non-existent at the beginning, but as things ramped up and went on, things got more interesting, more fluid. I keep finding myself like pleasantly surprised at Disco matches in these classic reviews. After a while, I keep reminding myself, like, wait a minute, people might talk shit about Disco like today, but like back at this time, he's a great worker and a hell of a hand. He's doing a great job here holding his own in WCW with guys who I think get a lot more respect and a lot more put on a pedestal, so to speak. Not in a bad way, but Disco's usually kind of a forgotten gem of WCW around this time because he's working with guys like Kidman and Malenko and all of these guys like this, and he's kind of like put on the back burner compared to these other guys with like better legacies and lineages. But Disco still holds his own perfectly well here, and he's really fun to watch at this time. Joe Gomez takes on Steve Mongo McMichael, who's accompanied by his wife Deborah McMichael. Of course, Mongo is the former Chicago Bear turned WCW broadcaster turned Four Horsemen member. He turned heel on his partner Kevin Green in a match the previous month at Great American Bash. He was recruited by the Horsemen after being handed a briefcase full of money and a Four Horsemen t-shirt. It's amazing the lengths people will go to for free swag. This, by the way, is Mongo's 3rd professional match, and it's in front of God and everybody in a singles match. No safety net this time, folks. Mongo is very intense in this matchup here. Lots of punches, lots of kicks, some chops, lots of knees. I said he was intense. I didn't say he was good. Mongo's working over Gomez with a camel clutch. Gomez powers out, hits a jawbreaker. Mongo with a very rough-looking neckbreaker coming off the ropes, and Joe kicks out. Mongo goes for the figure 4 of all things. You are not qualified to use that move yet, Mongo. You've not earned your stripes. Gomez counters it into a roll-up, of course. Joe with a backdrop. Mongo falls into the ropes in kind of an ugly manner. Mongo is seriously gassed at this point. He catches Gomez and drops him with a tombstone to win this pretty boring, pretty sloppy match. I give it 1 star out of 4. It's not bad for a guy wrestling his 3rd match. It's important to reiterate, but you could have cut the time of this match in half. It would have been so much better for everyone involved. Speaking of the Horsemen, Ric Flair is backstage being interviewed alongside his lady friends, Miss Elizabeth and Woman, who, by the way, is macking on Gene Okerlund this entire time. Flair says that after he beats Konnan after Monday night, he will be the U.S. champion and the World Heavyweight champion, and Gene is very flustered by Woman's advances.
I'd have Liz tap into that big source of money she's got so we can have a private party, Gene.
A private party?
Well, around this time, Konnan's in a pretty prominent position in WCW because not only has he been hired as a wrestler, he's also the person who was instrumental in hiring guys like Rey Mysterio, Psicosis, and other cruiserweights to WCW as well. Not only is he the U.S. champion here defending against Ric Flair, who's accompanied by Miss Elizabeth and Woman, by the way, he's also the IWAS and the AAA World Heavyweight Champion. He would defend those belts on WCW occasionally. He was being billed as the Mexican World Championship, though. Early on this matchup, Konnan slaps Flair and Flair bumps for it. Konnan puts him in the surfboard, but we don't get a full upright extension. Some good back and forth early on. Lots of Flair shtick you've come to know and love. The chops, the backdrop, etc. On the outside, K-Dog dives onto Flair off the apron, and Miss Elizabeth takes a lot of it too. That's pretty rare for her to bump. Woman shakes Konnan off the top rope. He takes a tumble. Flair distracts the referee, and Woman takes Konnan to Dick Kick City. Some more blatant cheating and double teaming by Flair and the ladies here. Konnan fights back though as Woman screams her head off. He drop kicks Flair off the apron, and Flair makes a terrific noise on the way down.
Konnan kicks him up.
Flair goes for a figure 4. Konnan catches it in a roll-up. We get a kick out. Konnan gets his own figure 4 locked in, and Heenan with his great call saying, "Come on, Flair, turn it over like they do on you all the time." Konnan catches a hip toss attempt into an abdominal stretch into a pin, which I've never seen countered quite like that before. Liz then gets on the apron for the longest damn time. Woman is on the opposite end with her shoe in hand. They take forever to set the spot up. Woman decks Konnan with the shoe. It did not look very clean. Flair pins Konnan with his feet way up on the tippy top rope to win the U.S. Championship. I give this one 1.5 stars. It's not Flair's best work. It's it's standard fair Flair here. A lot of the shtick that, like I mentioned, nothing too fancy. I know it was part of the story, but the constant blatant interference by Woman and Liz really drug this match down for me because when you have that much interference, it makes the referee look dumb. And I'm always kind of the opinion that the referee should never be made to look that dumb, where he's just like staring right at Miss Liz the entire time while all this stuff's going on in the background. And he's just totally transfixed fixed. It's just, that takes me out of it. That kind of knocked the score down for me on this one. Not too long after this, Konnan would join the Dungeon of Doom just as the group was on death's door, so that phase didn't last very long for old K-Dog. Backstage, Gene Okerlund is outside the Outsiders locker room. He says he can hear the voice of the third man in there, but he can't make it out, so it's muffled, yet he says he can kind of recognize it. It rings in the back of his mind, in the subconscious. So they're either teasing it's somebody that he and we already know. I like the way they're building this up. In your penultimate match, Arn Anderson and Chris Benoit take on Kevin Sullivan and the Giant. The Four Horsemen and the Dungeon of Doom had been butting heads ever since the Alliance to End Hulkamania failed in their mission at Uncensored. Or did they? Now, of course, at this point, Giant is the WCW champion, not defending his belt here, but the stipulation is if the Horsemen win this match, then one member of their team, likely Ric Flair, would challenge the Giant the next night on Nitro. Giant and Sullivan jump Anderson and Benoit on the ramp, but then Mongo attacks Giant with the briefcase. Giant runs after him to the back, and the Taskmaster's all by himself for about 30 seconds. That was really necessary. Benoit and Sullivan with a lot of bad blood in this match, stemming all the way back from Slamboree. And of course, Sullivan, who was the booker of WCW at the time, famously booked his own divorce because he booked Chris Benoit to steal away his wife, Nancy, aka Woman, from him in kayfabe on television, but then famously this kayfabe angle turned into a real-life relationship. Nancy would divorce from her husband Kevin, marry Chris, and have a child together, and that's where I'm going to leave that story off. But these two are definitely, you can see they're going at war here. They're really laying into each other. Really aggressive work by all of the people in this match. It really feels like a grudge match. Arn goes for a DDT on Sullivan. Giant lays him out with a clothesline on the apron. Benoit with a twisting crossbody attempt on Giant, who catches him and throws him into Arn. Sullivan with a very labored slingshot onto Arn in the corner, which causes some malfunction at the junction. Giant with the hot tag, and the crowd goes absolutely nuts for it. Benoit and Sullivan make their way to the announce booth while Giant works over Arn. A chokeslam to Anderson. The Giant wins. The lone blemish on the Horsemen's record on the night. I give this one 2.5 stars. Really solid tag team match. Really hard-hitting stuff. I think that all three of the guys out there, everyone but the Giant, did very well. Giant didn't do bad either. He was well protected, and when they used him, it was very effective. But after the match, the brawl between Benoit and Sullivan continues into the sand on the stage, using a chair. Back into the ring, Benoit with a top rope back suplex. Woman finally arrives and pleads with Chris to stop attacking Kevin. So clearly, she still has some feelings for Sullivan here. Giant comes back to the ring and chases Benoit out. He then carries Sullivan over his shoulder, then very precariously exits the ring with him still on his shoulder to boot. That looked kind of like scary balancing act, but Giant pulled it off. In your main event, it's the Hostile Takeover match. The very fate and future of WCW hangs in the balance here as Sting, Lex Luger, and the Macho Man Randy Savage take on the Outsiders and third man to be announced. Now, on May 27th, 8 days after his final match in the World Wrestling Federation as Razor Ramon, Scott Hall invaded an episode of Monday Nitro in his denim vest. A few weeks later, Kevin Nash, the former Diesel, joins the fun, and they're not saying this explicitly, but they are definitely alluding to the fact that these two are still current Federation workers, invading WCW from up north. Ooh, those baddies from up north are going to threaten our whole way of life. But of course, it's not the case. They are under WCW contract, but this did bring about some litigation by the Federation against WCW for what they're calling misleading statements on the part of how Hall and Nash are portrayed. That's a whole other thing. But they won't even mention Hall and Nash by their names until a few minutes into this main event at Bash in the Beach. But these guys are just causing chaos for weeks and weeks. At the Great American Bash, like I mentioned, Kevin Nash powerbombs Eric Bischoff through the stage. We haven't seen him ever since. And so then Sting, Luger, and Savage are selected by way of lottery to team up and try and stop the Outsiders from destroying everything they hold near and dear in WCW. Everyone in the company is on edge as to what's going on with this invasion. Michael Buffer says the sanctity of WCW is on the line here. The match could very well be for the future of the company. Bobby Heenan compares the anticipation of this match and the identity of the third man as like waiting for the O.J. Simpson verdict. Like, okay, Heenan, kind of apples and oranges, but I see where you're going with that. Only Hall and Nash show up for their match. The third man is nowhere to be seen yet. We get Sting's music and some pyro for like a half second before Gene Okerlund shows up and gets a pre-match interview. Where's the third man? Hey, Chico, he'll be here when he's here. Hall still doing the Razor Ramon voice is weird, but I see why they're doing it just to keep people guessing about like where his intentions truly lie. Like I mentioned, it's amazing the amount of restraint the announcers have here in describing Hall and Nash. Like I said, only about 5 or 6 minutes into this match do they finally start acknowledging Hall and Nash by their name. Until then, it's like the big man and these guys and those two, and so it's the big man and the slightly less big man, I guess, because this hall is still freaking huge. Luger and his weird eyes are knocked out of the match early on. He's taken off on a stretcher, which evens things up for the time being. As we're getting some work in the corner, Dusty just keeps screaming, "Who be bad now? Who be bad now? Who be bad now?"
This is Savage. Who be bad now? Who be bad now? Who be bad now? Deal on him, brother.
Nash goes for an elbow drop on Savage, who does sit up, but Nash hits him anyway. Ouch. Nash and Hall begin working over Sting for the longest time, and we get a lot of like stalling and jaw-jacking in between spots between Savage and the Outsiders. He'll get up and like yell at them and stuff. And, you know, normally I would find a lot of like stop-start like this to be detrimental to a match, but I think in this case it really works because it adds to the storytelling and the world building they're trying to do. Really, this tension, this like, you know, all this fabricated shoot element of like not liking these Outsiders and these invaders. I think that really adds a lot to this matchup. Speaking of storytelling, lots of dread and doom and gloom and fear on the part of the announcers. The entirety of this match, they are trying to speculate on what will happen, what could possibly happen to WCW if the Outsiders win this match. Everything will be topsy-turvy. Chaos will reign in WCW. I've never seen the hand drop gimmick for an abdominal stretch before. That's new. Here we go. Sting makes a valiant comeback and tags in Savage, who comes in hot. We get a low blow by Nash. Everyone is down, and here we go.
Hogan is in the building! You're damn right he is! Go get him, Hulkster! Yeah, but whose side is he on?
Hulk Hogan arrives, he clears the ring, tears off his shirt, and hits the damn leg drop on Macho Man Randy Savage. Oh my God, Hogan was the third man this entire time, has turned his back on WCW and the wrestlers and the fans. How could this possibly be? What a catastrophic turn of events this has turned out to be. Of course, the match is not officially given a winner, but the Outsiders and Hogan stand tall. Gene Okerlund enters the ring, the famous shot of him interviewing Hogan in the ring while all the trash is filling the ring and everything. Hogan with his famous, he declares the birth of the New World Order, or the New World Organization as he called it in this promo. He says, "For 2 years I held my head high. I did everything for the charities and everything. And after the reception, I just got on my way out here. You can stick it, brother." Just, it's one of the best heel promos you will ever see. And it just lays bare all of the motivation and all the reason and justification that Hulk Hogan made this turn. And it's, one of the smartest decisions Hogan ever made as far as like it being a person involved in wrestling to hitch his wagon to the NWO and, so selflessly volunteer himself to turn heel for this and, just only create one of the biggest booms in professional wrestling at that time. I give this match 3.5 stars out of 4. As a match itself, it is pretty so-so, but you have to give this a higher rating just because of the historical significance of this matchup. It is one of the biggest twists in wrestling history, one of the biggest heel turns in wrestling history, and it's one of those big historical moments. Where were you when Hogan turned heel and formed the New World Organization of Wrestling? It's hard to believe it was just a few months before this at Uncensored 96 that Hogan and Savage single-handedly eliminated the Alliance to end Hulkamania, 18 other dudes in the triple-decker cage. And fans were so sick of Hogan by this point that him turning heel, it was the right move. And I was joking earlier about Hogan being selfless about it, but it was a very calculated risk that really paid off for a lot of people involved. And anyone who wants to discount this moment because, oh, it's Hogan, they're doing a disservice to this moment because it really set in motion not just WCW's success, but by extension, the World Wrestling Federation's success, because it was this moment, the formation of the NWO, that really had Nitro kicking Raw's ass every week in the ratings, forcing the Federation to really think about how they were going to present themselves as a product from here on out, creating the Attitude Era, creating the heightening of the Monday Night War, and basically changing wrestling as we knew it. This is the most pivotal moment, I will argue, the most pivotal moment in wrestling in the last 30 years. And there's this one moment here that I wanted to address. There's the famous line where as Hogan's making his way out of the ring, Heenan yells, "But whose side is he on?" before Hogan turns, which a lot of people complain as Heenan is spoiling the heel turn, and I can understand that, but you also have to look from the personality of Heenan here, because he has always canonically been against Hogan, going all the way back to the Federation days and carrying that over in WCW. He never liked Hulk Hogan, whether he was, the babyface at the beginning or even when he turned heel and joined the NWO. Always anti-Hogan, always not trustworthy of Hogan's motives and intentions. So you can, with that context, it makes a lot of sense for Heenan to go, well, whose side is he on? Because he has no idea who to trust at this point. But be that as it may, even though I understand the context, I also agree with people who say, oh, he's spoiling it. I'm not saying he's spoiling the heel turn, but it does kind of lessen the effect of the heel turn here, because if he never said that, it would be more of an obvious, oh, well, he's clearly going to join WCW and help out those guys. Oh no, then it shocks us with the leg drop. I think if he didn't say that, it would be a much more powerful moment, but I get why Heenan said it. My final grade for WCW WCW Bash at the Beach 96 is a B+. Now, many will consider this pay-per-view to be a one-match show, and for historical purposes, they're right, because most people just remember the one match at the end and Hogan's heel turn. But don't sleep on this show, because there's a lot of other good stuff on the undercard of this event. You know, there are some not-so-great matches on this show. Some are so bad they're good, some are just bad, but there's a lot of mid-card stuff in this that just really stand out, like the Psicosis and Rey Mysterio. The dog collar match is that so bad it's good match where you can't turn away from it. It's like bad, but it's also hysterical. Malenko versus Disco is a hidden gem, and of course, like I said, the main event, the six-man tag that turns into the reveal and the birth of the New World Order. It's a moment so epic, you cannot help but rate this show strong on the whole. But there are other things besides the main event that really make it a solid show that I recommend to anyone. Well, I hope you enjoyed my review of Bash at the Beach 96. Thanks once again to Christian and Wesley for nominating this show. If you want to play a role in determining which shows I review, be they good, bad, or somewhere in between, go to patreon.com/wrestlingwithregret, become a $10 backer or above, and you'll have the chance to nominate classic shows for me to look at in the future. Next time, now I kind of tilted the scales in the favor of this show a few weeks ago when I was reviewing Great American Bash 95 and saying, I really want to see what happens at the next pay-per-view. Well, y'all heard my wishes and it's been requested, so now I'm going to do it. We're going to go back in the timeline a little bit and cover WCW Bash at the Beach 1995. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.